Last week, I had the opportunity and once again, the honor of having one of our good friends to WCPT and certainly to Choose Views on my show. And we talked a lot about immigration. We talked about political races. We talked about where we are as a country right now. And that, of course, is Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, one of the top immigration attorneys in the country, straight out of Texas. And Kate was kind enough. I said to her live during the show, I said, there's one other thing that we want to talk about. It's a big thing, but it's certainly part of the immigration conversation. And I asked her if she would be willing to come back quickly so that we could get this on the table right now. Kate, good morning and welcome back to the show. Good to have you with us this Monday morning.
Yeah, good morning. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Yeah. So, and by the way, guys, KLG for Texas, in case we don't get to it, in terms of her race for state senate in Texas. All right. So one of the things that in this conversation around immigration is that people have made, particularly those who are opposing the people that are coming across the southern border, coming to our country, because the uninformed or those that are informed but extraordinarily biased say things like they're taking our resources. They're causing. I saw a testimony, a congressional hearing where one of the Republicans said, and they're causing the cost of homes to be more expensive, and just a litany of things that folks coming across the southern border. And I like to be specific when I talk about the border because we have 4 of them. But the people who are labeled with that are oftentimes it's a 1,000% in the other direction. And when it comes to resources being given to people who are here illegally, or however the GOP wants to try to tag them with something negative. And there's all this evidence that, and not just opinion, but data that speaks completely to the opposite and in a major $1 trillion way. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about this case study, guys, that everyone should get their hands on by the Cato Institute that states that immigrants reduced deficits by $14.5 trillion since 1994. Kate, let's talk about, we always talk about the legal part, and that's important, obviously, but let's talk a little bit about the economic part of our immigration, and certainly in the last, 5 to 10 to 20 years. This goes back to 1994.
Yeah, and I think this part of the conversation is where we might actually make some progress, because a lot of immigration touches on people's emotions, and so someone like me, I feel a lot of emotion about immigration and the stories of immigration and the humanitarian aspect. And there are people on the other side of immigration who actually feel really afraid. And that's what's driving them. So I think what can be important, what can be helpful as we have these conversations is to just talk about the data. And that's why studies like this Cato Institute study are so helpful, because there have been a lot, just so many economic studies that consistently show that immigrants add to the economy. But what's special and new about this Cato study is, number one, Cato Institute is nonpartisan. Number two, this is a 30-year study. This is, maybe the first of its kind over this long stretch of time that looks at the cost, or the benefit, I should say, of immigrants at all levels of government, at local levels, state levels, federal levels, and ultimately what at the end of this 30-year period have we learned? And it is what you said, Richard, $14.5 trillion surplus because of immigrants, and that at every single level of government, local, meaning your city, your schools, your hospitals, your county, your state, your sales tax, your property taxes, your income taxes at the state level, the federal level income taxes, the expenditures that the federal government has on immigrants, at every single level of government and every single taxing system, by a large margin, immigrants provide more to this American economy than they take. And there is just no question about that. And so it's really important that we hammer on this data and take the feelings out of it when we're trying to actually move the needle in these conversations.
Kate, one of my good friends and a gentleman that hosts another show on WCPT, his name is Eric Grant, and the show is called The Family Meeting. It airs on Sundays from 4 to 6 p.m. And Eric talks about this so often from the vantage point that you just presented, which is the data is really where we want to get to. And in so many categories, not just in immigration, but in so many areas where we're trying to, as progressive liberal Democrats, make the statement, make the case that we have historically been on the right track of doing things the right way and getting more things done. This is irrefutable. And it's not just, I said 5, 10, or 15 years. This is going back to 1994. Mm-hmm. So that's a life. There are people who are yelling and screaming about how immigrants are taking away their jobs and causing problems for them that weren't born where the data goes back to in this conversation. And that's unfortunate that they're young. But the point is that there are people who don't even recognize that there's folks who came before you that made the path for you. And I use that, I say that a lot. Folks that came before you that made the path for you. Mm-hmm. And in many, many cases, the demographics of our immigrant population speaks loudly to this. Now, some people have said, well, it's the other immigrants. It's not the ones that are coming. But we know our strongest numbers are, that's why I wanted to identify earlier, the southern border. Mm-hmm. Because this report breaks down the categories of employment to the extent that it breaks down where not so much the categories of employment, but the income levels. Mm-hmm. And so it does experience all income levels, but it does highlight the fact that much of the link of this to things like agriculture, things like home building, things like everyday necessities is where a lot of that money has come from. Talk a little bit about that in your experience for people who are in those careers, if you will, that happen to be immigrants to this country.
Yeah, and I think these are the jobs that we think about a lot, or that people talk about a lot with immigration: construction, hospitality, landscaping, and these are sectors that rely very, very heavily on immigrant labor, and they would fail without immigrant labor. But, and you and I have talked about this a lot, Richard, we also know that immigrants in every sector are supportive economically. I mean, in Texas, 1 in 5 of our doctors is an immigrant, and I think it's 3 of our nurses is an immigrant. 1 in 2 of our home healthcare workers, and we've got aging baby boomers. They're immigrants, but immigrants also tend to be more entrepreneurial. They're heavily represented in the STEM industries, and the innovation and tech. I mean, it's really any industry that you look in is bolstered and benefit by immigrant labor. And so like you said, it isn't just, oh, well, here up at the top, immigrants add, but they drain down at the bottom. No, the truth is, immigrants go to school and they go to the hospital emergency room. That is accurate. But you know what else they do? They pay sales tax. They pay property tax. They pay income tax. They support our economy. They fill our labor force. And all of those things that they do on all sectors has a 14.5, we'll just keep saying the number, 14 trillion surplus over a 13-year period. It is so much money.
Kate, you and I can have some fun with this. That's a heap of money, y'all. It just is. But listen, Kate and I are smiling and talking about this because it's something to smile about and to be excited and joyous about. And part of the reason is so oftentimes the conversation, to your point earlier, is the emotional one. And I get that in the conversation about immigration. And it should be to some extent. And it also should be how excited we can be about what people have always brought to this country. And in many ways, people ask me, well, Richard, why do we not see more, see more immigrants in certain communities at certain levels of success in corporations? Well, my simple answer is discrimination and bias. It starts right there. But the counter to that, the upside, as I like to phrase it when I'm talking to people, but look at all the businesses that many immigrants have started. And it's unfortunately, it's the reaction or response to the discrimination. They go out and start their own thing and build it and grow it into something that becomes another successful neighborhood business. And it becomes a thing that people go to. You know, we could talk about restaurants, we could talk about, supplies, stores and all the rest. But ultimately, the discrimination that many have faced, the reaction was, okay, well, we'll go start our own. And that's what a lot of folks in our country don't get, that the success of a lot of neighborhood local businesses has been a response to discrimination in corporate America. And I know that you've watched that in your work from a legal perspective. You're dealing with so many other things, but this is one of the beauties of what this report is generating, is that this is where folks just decided to roll up their sleeves and pull up their bootstraps and go get something done that's benefited our country.
That's a really unique perspective, Richard. You know, necessity is a mother of invention. And I love that perspective that so many immigrants are entrepreneurial because they must be, and what a benefit this is for us at the end of the day. But the other thing that I'm thinking about is what else you touched on, which is the celebratory aspect of this, and how we're having fun and we're smiling and we're feeling appreciative of immigrants, and how much of that we really have been missing. And we have been caught as progressives in this defensive conversation around immigration since like 9/11, but definitely since the first Trump administration. And, you know, the Biden administration was pretty quiet on this stuff. And so what we've had is this big, loud anti-immigrant messaging. And then we've had some defensive messaging for immigrants from the Democratic Party and progressives. What we haven't yet gotten to is, you know, carrying forward the Bad Bunny Super Bowl message, the celebration, the absolute appreciation, admiration, and respect for what immigrants provide to this country. And I think that's kind of what we're feeling right now in this upswell. Just later today, I'm going to speak at a rally where a bunch of high school students in Texas are coming to protest at the Capitol. Like the kids are hitting the streets. It's so good, you know? And it's like, this is what we've needed. We've hungered for this, the celebratory aspect of it. And let's counter the other side of the narrative with joy and celebration. I love that idea.
Yeah. And that's the thing that so many people have said, don't let them rob your joy. Mm-hmm. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu, and we are talking to immigration attorney, candidate for state senate, Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. But today we're talking about the upside and the joy of what our immigrant populations have brought to this country for decades, and a report that those of you who are trying to find ways to be more proactive and less defensive, and I'll say this from a positive standpoint, more offensive, going on attack with joy and excitement and positivity about what our immigrant populations have done to benefit our lives. 14.5 trillion with the T dollars since 1994. That's something that frankly a candidate that supports immigration could actually run on. It's also something, hint, hint, that's also something that any of us who are in this fight to push back on ICE, to push back on the narrative that the folks that are coming from the southern border, because that's who's really being focused on, and folks that are coming from brown countries, because that's really who's being focused on, we could take a different approach, or at least add this to our arsenal. And that is, look at what these folks, our brothers and sisters from across the globe, have brought to our country, and be unapologetic about it. That's what I want to see more of us do. As progressive liberal Democrats do, is be less apologetic. Just take the offense and say, no, look at what we have done. And there we go. So, Kate, let's talk about where you talked about speaking, you talked about children, and that wasn't that's something that we maybe don't get to talk about a lot, not just you and me, but in general, what our children are saying about where we are right now and how these younger voices are out and protesting and marching and pushing back. What's that going to be like? What's going to be your message today when you have that opportunity?
Well, it's been really interesting here in Texas because the kids have been marching. I've gone to several of these marches and they're so inspiring, uplifting. And our governor, it's so embarrassing. Greg Abbott has gone after these student protesters and any of the school districts that support them. And he's, like trying to fire teachers and target these student protesters. And they're doing it anyway. This is a massive multi-school protest at the state capitol across the street from the governor's mansion. And so my message to them is going to be keep it up. Don't let them bring you down. And if you get detained, write your college essay about it. Go on and thrive. This is awesome. Keep it up.
That's good. That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. I had I was in doing some just, research is not necessarily the right word, but, you read one article and then obviously inside of that, or read one report, I should say, and inside of that is a link to something else. And then you suddenly, you become a momentary, expert or certainly highly curious on that subject matter. And one of the things that I came across, and I'll read it to you real briefly, is 6 ways to support immigrants right now. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one, so I'll start real quickly. Tell Congress our communities are stronger with immigrants. Stop detention and deportations now. Number 2, sign up for our monthly newsletter. And this comes from the AFSC. Sign up for our newsletter and webinar now. Third Tuesdays, protest, resist, and build with AFSC. Number 3, join protest in other actions in your communities, like you were just talking about. Number 4, promote messages emphasizing that immigrants make our communities stronger. Number 5, accompany immigrants in your community. And number 6, donate to organizations like American Friends Service Committee, who put together this brief piece that I found as a result of looking at the Cato Institute. What are your thoughts about those things that folks can be doing actively when it comes to supporting immigrants right now in the face of what we're dealing with?
I totally agree with that list. I think it's a really good list. And I'll note that number 1 is to continue to communicate with our legislators. These calls really do matter, even though sometimes it feels like they go into the ether. But I think that this is a really excellent list. What I'll add to this list is something that I realized the morning that Alex Preddy was murdered. And I was so distraught when I saw that video. And I called a friend of mine who is the chief of staff for a congressperson in the U.S. Congress. And I said, I need something else. What else can I tell people to do other than call their Congress people? And she and I had this conversation about all these folks in our midst who have stopped paying attention because it is too painful. They've shut off their social media. They're not watching the news. They're living out in the country. They're kind, caring people, but they are intentionally oblivious. And, we can sort of reserve judgment about that for now. But every one of us has 5 of those people in our life. Mm-hmm. And what we need to also be doing is reaching the people who are not seeing the stuff on their news feeds, because we really are, in our echo chambers, and our algorithms are feeding us what we want to see. And there are people who are not opting into that system anymore, and they actually don't know about what's going on. And so I'll add to just regular conversations with people who might be unaware. Is really important, because this overall, tipping the needle into the public opinion, falling so steeply against what Trump is up to, this is because regular people are becoming aware. And so that's up to us who are paying attention and we're up on the news, because it's a hard thing to do. It's a job and it hurts your heart. And a lot of people have decided not to do that.
Yeah. And that's part of the goal. I would say that the biggest singular goal that they haven't told us is a goal, but we can see it as a result of how people are, is that right there, which you described, is people have disengaged and tuned out. Not everybody, but that's what they want, because they know that the power of the people, and it sounds like, you and I are rewinding to the 60s and the civil rights movement, but the power of the people is what changes things. And we can look at any great leaders in our time, Kate, that have been assassinated. It's when they started to pull different factions of people together. And as that started to happen, then that person was no longer with us because they touched the nerve, which is to bring people together. So staying engaged and talking to folks and having the conversations is so critically important. The other thing you got to do is you got to support folks like Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, who are running for leadership roles in the state of Texas in the Senate, and work that she does to actually sleeves up, elbows deep, working with immigration concerns in our country. So Kate, as always, it's great to hang out with you. Thank you for spending some time this morning to talk about the economics of immigration and how our brothers and sisters in that space have really done such a great job of boosting our real numbers and our data there. So thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on again. I always love it.
And be safe today with in the speech that you do, but do your thing. We're going to be sending you some good love and support.
Thank you.
All right. Be well. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.